Welcome to the Unstuck Church podcast. I'm Sean, your host, and this week we're wrapping up our series of some of the most impactful episodes from the past year. Today we're replaying a conversation with Noah Herron from Way Church, where we explore some innovative approaches to engaging new people in their calling, especially focusing on younger generations. Noah's going to share some fascinating insights about creating community, leveraging social media effectively, and removing barriers to serving. Just a few reminders before we get into the episode. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening so you don't miss an episode. We're going to be back with brand new podcasts starting August 6th. And before we dive into the episode, I want to thank this week's podcast sponsor, PlainJoe. If your church is going to be effective at engaging new people, one of the most basic areas you need to be great in is providing clear direction. If they can't find you or find their way through your building, the chances they'll return drop significantly. If that's an area your church could improve in, PlainJoe has a creative and talented team that really are experts at creating placemaking signs and wayfinding markers to help tell your church's unique story and to point people in the right direction. I've used PlainJoe at the churches that I've served, and you can actually learn more about PlainJoe at plainjoe.net. All right, now here's Amy to introduce you to today's guest, Pastor Noah Herron.
Noah Herron, he is the lead pastor of Way Church in Nashville. He and his wife, Maddie, along with a few friends, planted the church just in September of 2023, so a year and a half ago. And over the past 16, 17 months, the church has grown to over 800 people. Wow. And I know. And what's unique about his church, though, is that as a young leader himself, they are primarily reaching Gen Z and millennials in Nashville. And so, in fact, one of our former interns went to that church, and she got that church on our radar. So I sat down with him to hear his perspectives, because I think he's got a unique view on how they're helping these mostly 20-somethings kind of find their purpose, help them to engage in ministry. And so I'm going to share this interview, and then I think coming out of it, we can share a couple of the takeaways from it. So here's my interview with Noah. Well, we are in a podcast series on strategies for churches to reach new people and to actually retain them. And one area we see churches neglecting, kind of as a general rule, is actually helping people get engaged in their calling. We think church leaders should be asking the questions like, are we creating enough space for people to use their gifts here? What's your reaction to that question?
I have a long-winded answer that I'll try to make short, but I think about that all the time, just because I was a part of a ministry prior to us starting Way Church. I led a college ministry for about 5 years before being a full-time evangelist, and we had such a high turnover rate as far as like we'd see people accept Christ every week, and they would be really engaged for a certain amount of time, and then they would kind of leave. And I just it broke my heart for a bunch of different reasons. But when we got to Nashville, we spent a lot of time just praying, like, how can we minimize that as much as possible? Like, how can we keep the front door wide but shut the back door? And I really think if you look at like every church that preaches the Bible, believes the Bible, has sound theology, there's kind of like three major components. There's like the Jesus component, there's the community component, and there's the mission component. And different churches call them different things. But really there's kind of those three lanes. And when I was growing up and in the churches that I was a part of, they're amazing churches. The focus was typically on the Jesus and the mission, right? And it was like, if we can get people to buy into our mission, then they'll stay. And I think with Gen Z and millennials in particular, which is what most of our church is made up of right now, we're praying that that will change some, and we'll have some more, we call them chronologically superior saints. We need some spiritual moms and dads at our church. But I really feel like with the younger generation, like they're craving community so deeply that what we are trying to do is really focus more on the community aspect, because we feel like if we can get people into genuinely deep community, then they'll stick around and they'll be more open to our mission. They'll be more open to Jesus. There's so many Gen Z and millennials here, especially in Nashville, who they would just say, "Hey, I'm not interested in a conversation around Jesus." But what we found is if they can find community and see that people really care about them, no strings attached, they're much more open to a conversation about faith. And so that's the strategy that we're going. I'm sure that there is a million ways to go about it, right? Different churches see different things work all over the place, but that's the strategy that we've been kind of deploying. And we're really seeing a high percentage of our people stick around. In fact, I was just looking at photos from our first vision night that we had, which was 9 months before we started the church. And there were about 90 people who showed up to hear about our church that day. Wow. And out of those 90 people, there were 8 of them that were there who joined. I mean, there were more than 8 that joined the team, but there's 8 in these photos that are now part of our church and serving at the highest capacity that you can serve at our church. They're like some of our core leaders, and they were at that first vision night. And so they've stuck, 2.5 years through this journey with us, and they're just all in. And so I'll take that every time.
So maybe related to what I was asking, how are we getting people engaged in their calling? What I heard you say, okay, wide front door, so anybody can come. Hopefully they feel comfortable and accepted. And then get them into community. And really what you just described is through community is where they started to find their calling. But it was community first and that piece second. That makes a lot of sense. Here's another question for you. There's been a lot written about the current cultural crisis of like meaning and purpose. And that's clearly affecting Gen Z in many ways. Can you share any stories of how you're seeing young people respond to the purpose found in the gospel through your church?
Yeah, I mean, I think the moment somebody is a part of changing someone else's life, like when they actually have a hand at play, that just makes it so much more meaningful to them. And so something that we're really trying to communicate is as good as we can is like, hey, this calling is not the pastor's calling only. Like this is your calling. Like you're called to not just receive the gospel, you're called to share the gospel. So, our vision, and we say this almost every single week, is we want to see more people accept Christ through our small groups than through our gatherings, through like one-on-one conversations. And so, we had a guy in a small group season 1 of our church, which was just the first, we do seasons, which last about 4 months. So the first 4 months of our church, this guy got in a small group and we were in a series where I was challenging everyone to share their faith. He didn't want to share his faith. He didn't really feel comfortable doing that. So he just invited his coworker with him to a small group. And his coworker is not a follower of Jesus, literally a former cocaine addict, like legitimately, like serious former addict, like still in recovery and trying to fight through it. Starts coming to these groups, starts having a great time. I'm getting text messages from the group leaders saying there's this guy here. He drops an F-bomb every once in a while, but he seems to be having a great time. I think like the Lord's doing something in his life. Long story short, that guy, the cocaine addict, gave his life to Christ in the small group. And he now is over one of our services' entire security and safety team. He's an amazing dude. His name's Anthony. And the guy who invited him to our church, that put a spark under him. The guy who invited him to small group, like he didn't actually, get to share the gospel with him personally, but he was the one who got him to the small group. Yeah. And that has really propelled their entire small group to be like, hey, like we can do this. Like, look what God did in our friend's life. Let's keep doing this. And so I think it takes like, all it takes is one time you getting to be a small part of someone else's life being changed forever for you to go, hey, like this gospel thing, yeah, I knew it worked in my life, but it can work in other people's lives. And like, I have a part to play.
And how great, just the usage of both the weekend service and the small group community to provide safe places in both places for people outside the faith to come in and have a chance to hear the gospel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you share some specific ways your team is helping people engage their calling at the Way Church?
Yeah. So, man, I keep going back to community because we really do care so much about it. But our way, we call them way groups, our small groups. The way that we have them structured is it's 10 weeks on and then 6 weeks off. So there's a 10-week season, we call it, and then a 6-week off season. Mm-hmm. And we really intentionally schedule the content of those 10 weeks to try and do two main things. The first one is get the group to grow closer together in community. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is to get them to go from a spectator to a participator in what God's doing in our city. And so week one is really about building trust. It's like a big potluck. Everybody brings food and people are kind of sharing their current dream and their current struggle. We do some of that on that night, and there's just some vulnerability and stuff like that. And then we spend a few of the 10 weeks around specific content that aligns with the sermon. But we do 2 out of the 10 weeks, we do something called a missionary mindset week. Nice. Where we put away the Bible, which sounds crazy, but we put away the Bible, and the one thing that you have to do is you have to invite someone who either isn't a part of our church or someone who isn't a follower of Jesus. And these groups, they get to decide what they're going to do on that week. But we might have one group go to the park and play pickleball or play volleyball. Another group might have a game night at somebody's house. But you're just inviting people in.
So good.
To community. And it's not like this bait and switch. It's not like everybody gets there and the group leader's like, here's the gospel, repent right now. It's not that. We hope that they will eventually, but it's really just again, can we scratch that itch of almost creating a place where we're thrusting the people in groups to just do one small piece of their calling, which is to be someone who shares the gospel, to be someone who shares their faith, to be someone who's a friend of sinners like Jesus. And so that's a way we're trying to kind of force people to go and just create environments to do it. And then I would say in those groups, we're creating these discussion questions really in a way that hopefully gets people to talk from week to week. That's not just about this is what Pastor Noah said, and here's some more notes to
so
take.
There's not a fill in the blank they go through as they're talking through it.
Yes, I mean, not really. We want them to contextualize it to what's going on in their world. So a lot of the questions are hey, this week we preached about forgiveness, and there's different people, there's a music producer in this room and there's a teacher in this room, and who do you need to forgive this week? It's really trying to contextualize it so that they can talk about it and it can become part of their own story.
Well, it's kind of what really great preachers do is they explain the Bible in a way that it applies to people's life. And what I'm hearing you say is in the community groups and the way groups, you're not doing theology as much as you are, how do you respond to what you've heard, what you've learned? That's great.
For sure.
What are some ways, we have a broad group of pastors that listen every week, and you are an anomaly probably in many of their worlds where you're we need some older people. A lot of churches are we need to change our ways so that we can reach this next generation, and you're doing that. So what are some ways you think churches could be better engaging Gen Z to leverage their gifts for the kingdom? Where do you see the opportunity?
Yeah, I think for something we were told when we were about to start was your church is going to look a lot like you demographic wise. And I think that in general, if you're a 50-year-old pastor, you're going to attract people 10 years younger, 10 years older, just in general. And that's amazing. I think we all should want all generations represented at our church. And so I just want to lead with we're probably going to have an easier time because I still struggle to grow a mustache. So younger people are gonna just gravitate, I think, towards our church. But something that I've really seen in the next generation is they don't need an older pastor to try to be like them as much as they need an older pastor who is genuine.
Yep.
Authenticity is such a buzzword with the next generation. If they feel like you're trying to be something that you're not, or the church is trying to be something that it's not, it's just an automatic no for them. And so you can just free yourself of the pressure of, I've got to wear a certain type of clothes, or I've got to preach a certain type of way. That's not really what they're looking for, but they do want to receive something that they don't have from you. And so, I think that a misconception about Gen Z and millennials is that they don't want things to be too hard, So like, let's not ask a lot of them. Let's not move too quickly because they might not have the commitment inside of them to stick around for that. If we do that, I would push back on that really hard and say, if you're preaching the word and you're doing your best for community, I say push hard on the challenge because they want to be challenged. Nobody else is challenging them. They're not being challenged in the workplace a lot of the times. They're not being challenged, in one-on-one relationships. Like I really feel like even in the friendship dynamic, Gen Z and millennials just tend to be a little bit more afraid to hurt one another's feelings than other generations.
Yeah.
And so they're craving someone to just go, hey, this is where you are. This is where you could be. Let's get there. Like, let's go there. Like, let's drop the former self. Let's pursue the Lord fully. Just a quick example of this would be, we came this close to losing a couple at our church about 5 months in that I would consider some of the best leaders at our church. Young couple, a couple that we could not afford to lose in more than one way. And it was over just a standard that we were trying to keep that they weren't keeping. And it wasn't because they couldn't keep the standard. It's just they weren't. And I really did not want to talk to them. I did not want to address it. I was like, what if I come across too strong and they bounce, And we had this really difficult 2-hour conversation where when they left our house, I was like, they're gone. Like, there's no way. Like, I just told them the truth and told them that, some of these things are not Jesus-like. They're not representing our church, and we got to fix them. And it didn't feel like it was received well. Long story short, about 2 weeks later, we had another conversation where they came to me in tears and said that I didn't know how badly they needed to hear those things, and that no one had ever said that to them. And I'm not sharing this story I hate sharing stories where it makes, I'm the hero of the story. I'm not. I was terrified. My wife had to talk me off the ledge. But that couple is now, they're just invaluable at our church, and our relationship it could not be tighter.
Wow.
And I just think like the misconception is that we've got to coddle Gen Z and millennials when really they're just looking for people to tell them the truth, to call them higher, because they want to reach their own potential as a follower of Jesus in the workplace, as a parent. It's just a lot of them don't have someone that is willing to challenge them, but also stick with them to see them fulfill what God has for their life.
That's really good. Let me ask the question just a little bit different way. So because your church is made up of I always say it wrong, Gen Z and millennials, they're probably engaged all over your church. If you have that many people coming, I know that you have a very small staff, at least based on the interview I listened to with you and Carrie Newhoff. So you've got them engaged across the spectrum. Again, if you just think about maybe the average church right now, and when I say average growth, I actually mean a lot of our churches are pretty healthy, but they are trying to do some intentional things to engage that age group in the ministry of the church. Any advice you'd give for where to start or how to think about, moving them into spaces where they are now fully engaged in ministry, volunteer leadership?
Yeah, I always start with serving on Sundays, just because I think that that's something that most people can do. So we really push that just practically. Like, I don't want to get too much into the weeds unless you want me to, but like we do something every Sunday that we call Way Track. Okay. It's just a version of a growth track or membership class. And we've made that something that's 1 week long instead of multiple. It's about a 45-minute thing that's led by different people on our team each week. But almost every Sunday I'm pushing like, hey, if you want to get the most out of our church, serve our church. Yep. If you want to get the most out of what we have to offer, like join the team and stick with it for 6 months. And if you hate it, stop after that. But it's going to take about that long to really get the most out of what we have to offer here. And then we've made the barrier to entry really, really small, because we think that that just gives us the best chance of someone actually giving it a shot. So that's something that we do. I think the other thing is they're on social media, and you don't have to have the best social media in the game. I would just say, like, I see so many churches who use social media almost like a digital bulletin, where it's like, hey, this is when our class is, and this is when our service is. Like, we know when service is. We've been coming for 6 months. You know, we know what time it starts. You don't have to post it every Saturday. Like, but I think like a way that we're seeing, and we see at least 15 first-time guests a Sunday, and I would say a conservative guess would be 75% of them hear about our church from social media. And the approach that we've taken is we either want to what we post, we either want it to create FOMO. So like fear of missing out, like, oh man, like that just looks amazing. Like I need community like that. Or we want it to be helpful to people who are already Christians. So if it's not one of those two things, we're not going to post it. So like an example of something helpful would be like, maybe it's a sermon clip, but maybe it's a swipe through that's just like, hey, 4 red flags for dating relationships. Okay, all the single people, that's something that's helpful to me. Maybe it's a 60-second clip of a breakdown from the past Sunday's message, and it's just going a little bit deeper in something. But it's like I'm getting something out of this during the week instead of just seeing stuff about what's happening next at the church. And so I think that's like really low-hanging fruit for people to just engage young people that are already a part of their church throughout the week, but also possibly reach young people who aren't in their church throughout the week.
Well, Amy, that's a great introduction for Noah with all of our listeners and some of the other church world. Wonder what stood out to you from that conversation.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he and his church are at in the years to come. It'll be fun to follow, just being 18 months old. Well, first, I believe I have a new title now. I am a chronologically superior saint. So if you could refer, you can start calling me that, Sean.
I'm not sure if I could say all of that very clearly.
I'll help you.
Thank you.
Chronologically superior. It's hilarious. Well, what stood out? Well, first, you heard his deep passion around creating community and addressing the issue of loneliness for this generation. And just as an aside, I would argue, like, since COVID, that's expanded to a lot of generations. But specific to Way Church and Noah's passion, you can see how they lead with community. Whatever question I asked, it always came back to connecting people to people. And I think it's through those connections that people at Way Church find faith, purpose, and meaning. And I would argue that's probably why their back door seems very narrow. So that was probably my first takeaway. The second, though, and it's related, but was their intentionality with the Way groups. I can't remember if he said this while we were recording or once we finished, but I love how they leverage their small group questions to provoke deeper relationships. So instead of like fill in the blank theology questions, they're more personal, like, how have you seen this, whatever the principle is, play out in your life? Or what Jesus has just said, will you share a moment in your life where that weakness actually led to a strength? Their group sessions are just guided so well, and they're diverse. They're not just gathering in homes, right? They're in public spaces in Nashville with non-Way friends. So I just thought there were some new things to consider about how they're approaching groups. And the third was probably Noah's thoughts on engaging this generation to serve within the social media team. I mean, of course, right? They are native to this landscape.
Right.
And we often talk about wanting to engage them in serving roles. But if you want to reach this generation, I encourage our listeners to gather a group of Gen Zers and have them audit your social media channels.
Yeah.
I bet they would have a lot to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot of fresh, innovative ideas to leverage digital strategy to reach more people. And I think Noah said their approach with social media is to either create FOMO, fear of missing out, or to provide helpful content that whoever watches it will get something out of it. And if it doesn't do one of those two things, they don't post it. And that's an intentional, strategic digital strategy. And we've said it before, but putting our services online should not be coined your digital strategy. It's a piece of it, but not the whole. Yeah. And lastly, just 800 people in 18 months, 4 services, 4 full services, starting a 5th. They need another building. These are great problems, but they are challenges in these stages of growth. And if not addressed, they'll get stuck. So I'm praying with him that they're going to find their building. By the way, they're also having a 3rd baby on the way. So
oh my goodness.
Noah, you hang in there. We're excited for your church and we're excited for the ministry and appreciate the things that he brought forward today.
Yeah. Make sure you get some sleep too, Noah. Goodness. Busy. All right, Amy. Well, this series has been really great. I've really enjoyed it. I hope listeners have gotten a lot out of it. As we wrap up today's episode and this series, any final thoughts from you?
I'll probably just double down on what I said last week. If you don't know your data, I really want to encourage you to access our vital signs assessment. It's for free. We've got a code for you to use for that. But again, it's got benchmarks in there that you can not only see your results, but how you're comparing. And it gives you a much more robust look at the overall health of your church because we cover over 15 areas that will help with that. So I encourage you to do that and continue to take a look at what your data is telling you then, because there are probably areas in there you can have some fun toying with, flexing a little bit, doing some R&D, research and development to make this next run of ministry just that much more successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And to get access to our free vital signs assessment, just go to our website, theunstuckgroup.com. At the top, click the button that says Learning Hub and sign up for the Learning Hub. And at checkout, make sure you use the code, the number 1 month free Learning Hub. That's the number 1 month free Learning Hub at checkout. And you'll get access for 1 month for free. You can run our vital signs assessment and get your full data report. Well, thanks for joining us for this replay episode of the Unstuck Church podcast. We really hope that you found some help, practical ideas, and value in revisiting this conversation about engaging new people in their calling. Don't forget, we'll be back with brand new episodes starting on August 6th. And until then, you can find show notes and additional resources for today's conversation at theunstuckgroup.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you back here on the podcast with a brand new episode next week.